My name is Shannon Dorsey, and I'll be talking about my book, Remade, A Life of Hope After Domestic Violence. When I was younger, my parents were still married, and they were happy for the most part. However, there would be times when they would fight, and it did get violent sometimes. So they decided to divorce when I was around 12 years old. I never really understood what love was. I don't think that I saw the best version of love or what love could be. I would meet up with older guys and talk to them. There was one guy in particular that he was 18 years old and I was only 13 years old. And I would lie to my dad, who I was living with, and told him that I was going to go see a friend from school. And I would go meet up with this guy and we would hang out at his apartment where his mom lived. I was 13 years old and he invited me to come hang out, which we did pretty often. There was a swimming pool in the apartment complex and we decided to go swimming that day. Something changed in him while we were swimming. He got upset about something and he held me underwater. I was struggling to get free and to get up, and finally he let me up and he thought that was funny, but I was really struggling to breathe underwater. And so he finally released me. We went back into the apartment where his mom was sleeping at the time. This was kind of a nighttime, and we were in the living room hanging out, and I was sitting on the floor and he comes over to me and he starts to kiss me, which we've kissed before, no big deal. But then he lays me down and I tell him I'm not doing anything. I don't want to do anything. And he told me to shut up, and he slapped me and told me I needed to be really quiet. He put his hand over my mouth and raped me that day. So I called for my ride, which was then my brother-in-law, and told him to come and get me, that I was done hanging out with my friend. And he came to get me, and I went home and acted like nothing happened. I kind of withdrew a little bit from my friends, from my family, but I tried to pretend like everything was okay so nobody would notice. I completely stopped going over there. I ignored, every time he tried to contact me to get him to call back, I would ignore it. If he called the home phone, I wouldn't answer. I just completely blocked him out of my life and told my friend who had introduced me to him that I just didn't want to hang out with him anymore. It was a struggle because I wanted to reach out. I wanted to get help, but I didn't know who I could trust with it. And I didn't know if anything would ever be done. You hear about people getting raped all the time and it's like a big blow up, but then nothing ever comes of it. They have to have all this evidence against them to be able to prosecute them. And I just thought that, at that time, since I was lying about where I was going and what I was doing, that I was at fault, even though now I know I'm not. But at the time, as a kid, I did think that I was at fault. After that, I was just really promiscuous and with different guys, and I had no business being with at that age. But I guess because I had no real sense of what love was and what it looked like and what a healthy relationship was, being so young, and that incident that happened really hurt me, kind of broke me. So it made me feel like I really couldn't trust anybody or be devoted to one person. I met a guy who was working for my dad at the time. We had exchanged phone numbers and began talking, and it became serious. So we decided to start dating. So we would go over to each other's houses and hang out. We did become sexually active together, and he seemed like a great guy. At that point in my life, my dad was doing drugs. Every conversation, he was yelling or he was passed out or something. So I started skipping school and hanging out with this guy. And then he said, "You can't live in these conditions. Why don't you move in with me?" I didn't know what a huge difference that was going to make, because the moment I moved in with him, he became violent. He started slapping me at first. If I said something wrong, if I made a joke, if somebody accidentally dropped something and I laugh it off, or he got really mad, really frustrated, and he would slap me, and then it escalated. He would punch me in the back of the head. He always punched me somewhere where nobody would know that it had a bruise. That went on for several years. We have 3 boys that we had together, and 6 years had gone by with all this abuse. I kept telling myself I'm going to get out, and every time that I tried and asked him if I could just go visit family or friends, he would tell me no, because you're not going to come back. And then I would get hit for even asking. The last straw was he had came home from work and he wanted to go out to the club, which he always did. He would cheat and he wouldn't lie about it. And he said there's nothing I could do. So he was going out to the club that night and he was getting dressed and ready to go. And I asked if I could go see my mom, and he hit me and he said, "No, you're not going anywhere." It escalated. I fell on the ground when he hit me, and he started kicking me with his steel-toe boots that he had on from work. And my 4-year-old son ran up to him and said, "Stop hurting my mom." And he pushed him to the ground. I said, "Stop, just stop." And He looked at me and he's like, "You're never getting away." It just took everything in me to just get up and act like everything was okay, like I did so many times before. But whenever he walked out the door to go to the club, I took suitcases out of the closet and I hurried up and packed them. And something told me to look out the window. And when I did, he was racing back down the driveway back to the house again. So I hurried up and threw the suitcases in the closet and sat on the bed like nothing was going on. And he walked in and he said, "I just wanted to make sure you weren't stupid enough to try and leave me." And then I said, "No, I'm not going anywhere." And he said, "Okay, good." And he left again, and I watched him go down the driveway again and got everything out. So I called my sister and she came and picked me up and took me away from there. And so I moved in with her. And I tried to move on. I kept getting calls from him threatening me, telling me that he was going to kill me, that my kids were going to grow up alone. He showed up to my sister's house. She wasn't home and I was outside, and he held me by my throat against the garage door, choking me. And my sister had pulled up just in time and was able to tell him, "Hey, you need to leave or I'm going to call the police on you." And he threw something at me and then he left. I ended up trying to get my kids on insurance, so Medicaid. And of course, they require that you file for child support. So in doing that, we had to go to court and determine, visitation and all of that stuff. And I agreed to weekend visitation and that I would meet halfway. And the second time the visitation happened, my oldest son came to me and said, "Mommy, he's making us drink beer every time we go with him. He's even giving it to my little brother, who was only 6 months old then." And he said he would put it in his bottle and make him drink it. And so at that point, I didn't care about any risk to myself. I wasn't going to let them go back to him again. And so I called the child support office and I got a voicemail. They're not really good at answering the phones over there. But I did leave a message letting them know that, I'm not letting the kids see him anymore and the reasons why. So from that point on, I just kept the kids to myself. I started to work and put the kids in daycare during the day and was doing great. And then I fell into a group at work and they would go out to the club. So I began going out to the club. But I think that never enjoying something like that and then jumping into it the way that I did since I was 21, I took advantage of everything. I would drink from the time I got to the club until the time the club closed. I began drinking almost every single day of the week. I made friends at work that were not all bad influences. One of them kept inviting me to church. I eventually said, "Look, church is not the place for me. And whenever you go to the club with me, then I'll go to church with you," is what I said. But he said, "I'm never going to go to the club, but one day you will come to church." And they ended up having a special service, so I brought all three of my boys with me. When I walked into that place, I felt a love that I never felt before. It was just a welcoming, warm love. And so I began going all the time. And me and this gentleman that had invited me became really close friends. And I opened up to him about my ex and about things that had happened to me. He was so non-judgmental. He didn't place any blame on me, which I wasn't expecting. I was told for 6 years that everything was my fault, that I was worthless, just everything negative you could think of. And here's this individual who's, being my friend and not judging me and not caring what I've done in my past. So anyway, we became really good friends, hanging out all the time. And I told him about my drinking problem and about going to the club. And he said, "Well, we'll just replace that with church functions." So we were in his bedroom hanging out after I had moved in. And I forgot what it was he said, but it didn't come out right. And so I laughed. And he said, "Don't laugh at me." And I was like, "Are you being serious?" And he said, "Don't ever make fun of me." And I was like, "I can't tell if you're joking or not." And I just kept laughing. And he wrenched me and he slapped me hard across the face. And I said, "Why would you hit me for?" And he said, "Like I said, don't ever make fun of me." And I began crying. I laughed at first, because of the situation. And I realized this guy just hit me. Like, this is real. This is really happening to me. Nobody's ever hit me like that in my life. I couldn't believe the situation that was happening. And then I began crying and asking him why he did it. And he said, again, "Don't make fun of me." And that was the first time. That would be many after that he had hit me. Sometimes we would be at family functions and his cousin was there. He had a female cousin there and a male cousin there. And his male cousin was talking. And so I was watching him talk. And he said, "Come here real quick." And so I left the area where everyone was talking, and I went off with him, and he banged my head against a car window, and he said, "Quit looking at my cousin." And I said, "He was talking, and so I was watching him talk." He said, "Well, I didn't say you could look at another guy, so don't look at him." There were several times like that. The night before of a parade, there was a time that he came home drunk, as always, and whenever he came home drunk, I would try to be as quiet as possible, and act like I'm asleep. All of a sudden, our son started crying, and I was trying to get him quiet, and I was trying to feed him or do whatever it would take to get him to be quiet, change his diaper. And he said, "If you don't shut him up in 5 seconds, I'm going to hit you." And he started counting down, and I said, "Please, I'm holding him." He said, "Well, then you might want to put him down because I'm going to hit you." And so I did. I put him down quickly because I didn't want him to get hit, and he uppercutted me right in the mouth. He got mad because it cut his hand on my teeth. So he hit me again. I was bleeding everywhere. I had to put a rag on. And his parents were in the next room, and all they said was they were banging on the wall and saying, "Keep it down, keep it down." They knew what he was doing. There's a history there in the family, but they just kept saying, "Keep it down." And the next morning there was a parade, and I wanted to take the kids to the parade so they could see something good, something happy. And so I took them, and it was right there, 1 block over. And whenever I came back, he said, "Where'd you go?" And I said, "I took the kids to the parade." And because I didn't ask his permission, he got mad, and he slammed my head into the sliding glass door. It didn't break, but I felt like all the blood just rushed to my face. Like it just felt like it was on fire. And his mom was right there, and his mom just said, "Stop it, stop it." And that's all she said. I just wish back then that somebody would have spoke up for me, that somebody would have came to my rescue, so to speak. Yeah, that was what my wish was every day. It felt really alone, utterly and totally alone. Like you have nobody that you can trust and depend on, because his whole family knew what he was doing and didn't stop him. I did get contacted from one of his cousins. She was 8 years old then. And after my book came out, she contacted me, and she told me she was so sorry because as an 8-year-old girl, she saw him punch me in the yard, and she didn't do anything or say anything. She told her mom, and her mom said that she was going to talk to his mom. But of course, his mom knew about the abuse and didn't care. But she said, "I wish I would have thought to call the police on him that day." And I told her, "Don't blame yourself. You're only 8 years old." But I mean, to think that a sweet, innocent 8-year-old wanted to come to my rescue when all these adults that saw him do this did nothing at all. That was heartbreaking. It really was. So now I am 43 years old. I have 2 books out. I'm an author and a speaker, and the man that kept inviting me to church is now my husband. I know a love that I never knew could exist. Happily married. We have a total of 6 kids now. So we have my 3 boys, and we have 2 kids together, and then we have adopted a girl. The kids are all thriving. They're doing amazing things. My oldest, who had seen the most abuse, is trying to become a police officer now. So they're doing just great things in life, and they've overcome so much, and they mostly want to never become anything like that. So they're good to the women in their lives. They're respectful and loving, and they have such a respect and a love for me. I couldn't ask for a better kids or a better family. So I had felt worthless for I don't even know how long. I just felt like I wasn't worth anything, that my kids would be better off if my sister raised them, that this world had nothing for me. And whenever I started going to church is when that changed. I realized that I was special, that I could be loved. And I think that's what the turnaround point was. I knew that I was someone important, and whether or not this one individual thought that or not, I could care less, because I know that I was a child of God. And so that made all the difference in my life now. And so my life is worth living now. And I do struggle sometimes with depression or anxiety about certain things. And if I hear a loud noise, I still jump. I think there's some things that just aren't going to go away permanently all the time, but it's a day-to-day process. It's not something that just goes away. It's something that you do have to work on and pray about, and just live your life to the best that you can every day. I would say don't wait. Don't wait till one of you are in danger for your lives. Don't wait until you have to fight for your life. Get out as soon as you are able. You're worth so much more, and you could be treated so much better, and you never have to stoop down to a level to think that you're worthless. You mean more than the world to somebody out there. And so it's better to just get out while you can and find what love is. That's not love. Somebody that hits somebody that's not showing love. It's not showing affection. That's not the love that God had intended for you. So my saying is get out any way that you can. Go to a women's shelter, call the police, file a report, and while he's locked away for the night or whatever, get your stuff and get out. I would say get help where you can. There's lots of, like I said, shelters who have resources, therapists. I've had to go do therapy myself, and at first I would frown upon it, thinking I'm never going to go to a therapist. But now I actually, I go to a therapist. It's healthy. It helps me to get past things and look at the brighter part of life, look at the things that have turned around, and know that I have a bright future ahead of me. I was able to get my associate's degree, graduate with my GED, and get my associate's degree. Like I said, I've become an author, and if I were to continue down the path that I would either be dead or I would still be feeling like I was worthless and not have accomplished anything at all. So just know that you are worth it all.